Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about the logical function if and its cousin ifs. So we're looking at a couple different logical functions here and how we can use them to make our models better. In this case, we're looking at a simple portfolio example. We have a loan portfolio, and we'd like to know some features about our data here. For example, we might want to know how many loans we have that have a balance greater than, say, $200,000. All right, so to do that, we're going to start out using the if function. So the first argument of our if function is a logical test. So in this case, we're interested in loans that are greater than $200,000. So our test then is going to be whether our loan amount in this column, in this row rather, is greater than our threshold, $200,000. If that's true, let's put a 1. If it's false, let's put a 0. We'll close that off. We'll use the mouse here to just copy that down. And we can very quickly count how many ones we have. In this case, if we want to add it up, we can do a sum. And we see that we have 8 loans with at least $200,000. All right, there are going to be other ways to do that calculation. Count if is going to come in handy, but we'll get to that in another video. All right, so that's one way to use the if function. You could also, output different things besides ones and zeros. Ones and zeros are very helpful because they help us to count things, and it still gives a nice visual indicator when something is true. So now you also might want to do some additional tests, right? So this first one is going to be greater than 200K. We also might want to do a test like less than, say, 300K. So we can start another parameter here, and we can use another if function. So in this case, we'll change this to 300,000. And now let's do a different if function. Same idea. Logical test is the loan amount in this case less than our $300,000? If yes, 1, otherwise 0. So now we can copy that down as well. And we can see that we move our sum over. Give it a second to compute. Sometimes it goes a little slow. We have 9 loans that are less than or equal to 300,000. So we've done this, 2 different if functions. And so, the natural third question then is, how many loans are actually between those two? Greater than 200,000, but less than 300,000. If you want to do that, well, we could just simply add this up. Right? We could add up our 2 columns, copy that down, and see any of the 2's are going to be situations where we have both indicators are true. Alternatively, we could use nested ifs. So in a nested if scenario, we're going to use 2 if functions, one inside the other. So our first condition here is still, is the loan amount greater than our 200,000 threshold? If that is true, we now want to test our second condition. So here's where the nested if happens, is we have another if inside the if. So our second question is the loan amount less than our $300,000 input? If all of that is true, let's go with a 1 rather, otherwise a 0. We'll close that if function. And notice that finishes the value if true for the first if function. So this whole inside if function only executes if that first condition is true. So we also have to provide the value if false for that first or outside if function. In this case, we'll do a 0. So now we'll get a 1 if it's true that the loan amount is bigger than 200,000 and less than 300,000, and only in that case. Any other conditions, and we'll get a 0. We run that through, and we see the same values that had 2's before are now 1's. And so we have 3 loans that meet that criteria. All right, so one other way that we can do this, and we can actually get a little more specific, is with the ifs function. So ifs allows you to test multiple conditions and then return different values as appropriate. So in this case, we can do our first logical test, same as we've been doing. Let's do that value, the loan value greater than or equal to 200,000. And if that's true, let's return 1. Our second condition then could be, is the loan amount less than 300,000? F4 to lock it. Is that true? Let's put a 2. Now, what that's going to do is it's just going to tell us ones or twos, right? And some of those things are actually both true, right? In this case, we have a situation where 1 is true, but the loan is both greater than 200,000, but also less than 300,000. So is a 1 really what we want here? It's not clear what you want there. It's going to depend on the situation. And so as a result, we have to be really careful if we're going to use ifs that we have mutually exclusive conditions. So to finish this off and to do it properly, we would now need to do a third statement where we do an and, where we say if we have both of these things true, right, we need the loan amount to be greater than $200,000 and the loan amount to be less than $300,000, then let's give a 3. So now we have kind of our 3 mutually exclusive options. And now what we should see is when this copies down, we actually didn't get what I was expecting. And this is an important thing to think about, is the reason that this is happening is that it goes in a sequential order of testing the if functions. All right? Within ifs, if the first statement is true, it stops and it stops checking. If the second statement is true, it stops and stops checking. So in this case, because the first statement was true, we actually got a 1 here. So if we want to get the right answer that we're looking for, well, we're going to have to take this and portion and move this to the front of our function. That way, that is the first thing that gets tested rather than the last. And if we make that change, now we see our 3's in the same places we've been looking. So the ifs function can be very valuable and powerful, but you have to be really careful with how you use it and know how the order is of how it's evaluating those conditions.